The morning sun peeked through the airport windows as passengers lined up to board Flight 327 from London to New York. Among the staff preparing for the journey was Jessica Parker, a flight attendant who had been with Elite Airways for over 6 years. She took great pride in doing her job by the book. Her uniform was always spotless, her smile professional, and her dedication to company rules unwavering. This Monday morning was especially busy. First class was packed with business people in expensive suits and a few famous faces from TV. Jessica checked her tablet one more time before greeting the first-class passengers. Everything needed to be perfect. "Good morning. Welcome aboard," Jessica said with a warm smile as she checked tickets and directed people to their seats. She loved this part of her job, making people feel welcome while maintaining the exclusive atmosphere of first class. About 20 minutes before takeoff, while Jessica was helping an elderly couple store their hand luggage, she noticed a very tall man approaching the first-class entrance. He wore a black hoodie, baggy sweatpants, and expensive-looking but casual sneakers. A pair of large headphones hung around his neck, and his face was partially hidden under the hood. Jessica quickly excused herself from the elderly couple and stepped toward the entrance. This wasn't the first time someone from economy tried to sneak into first class, and she was determined to keep things in order. "Excuse me, sir," Jessica said, standing firmly in the entryway. "This is the first-class cabin. May I see your boarding pass, please?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Yeah, I'm in seat 2A, he said in a deep voice with a distinct accent. He was so tall that Jessica had to look up to meet his eyes. Jessica glanced at the phone screen but didn't really look at the details. In her mind, this was clearly a mix-up. No first-class passenger would dress so casually on an international flight. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake," she said confidently. "First class is this way, and based on your boarding group, your seat should be in economy. Let me help you find your correct seat." The man raised his eyebrows. "Nah, you don't understand. I'm Big Shaq. This is my seat." He tried showing her the phone screen again. Jessica had heard the name before, some kind of rapper or social media person, she thought, but she wasn't impressed by celebrities trying to use their fame to get upgrades. "Sir, I understand you might be used to flying first class," she said in a lower voice, "but today your ticket is for economy. If you'd like an upgrade, that would have needed to be arranged before boarding. I'm happy to check if any seats are available for purchase, though I believe we're fully booked today." A few passengers were watching now, some with curious expressions. The man looked around, seeming to notice the attention they were getting. "Look," he said quietly, "I'm not trying to cause problems. Just check your passenger list for Michael Oluwatosin or Big Shaq. Seat 2A. Jessica was sure this was just another person trying to bend the rules. She had seen it all before. The excuses, the name-dropping, the confusion act. Her job was to maintain order. "Sir, I need to prepare the cabin for takeoff. Please return to your assigned seat in economy, and if there's truly been an error, we can sort it out once we're in the air." The man sighed deeply. For a moment, he looked like he might argue further, but then he just nodded. "All right then," he said, turning around. "We'll sort it out later." Jessica watched him walk away toward economy, feeling satisfied that she'd handled the situation professionally. Little did she know, she had just turned away the very person who signed her paychecks, the new owner of Elite Airways himself. And that mistake was about to turn her ordinary workday into the most unforgettable flight of her career. Jessica went back to her duties, helping passengers find their seats and stowing luggage in the overhead bins. Everything was running smoothly, and she had almost forgotten about the tall man she'd sent to economy. Almost. 10 minutes before takeoff, while Jessica was checking the cabin one last time, her colleague Raj rushed over with wide eyes and grabbed her arm. "Jess, do you know what you just did?" he whispered, his voice tight with panic. "What are you talking about?" Jessica asked, pulling away slightly. She didn't like being grabbed, especially not when passengers could see. Raj looked around and lowered his voice even more. "That guy you sent to economy? The tall one in the hoodie?" Jessica nodded. "The one pretending to be some rapper? What about him?" "He wasn't pretending." Raj shook his head in disbelief. "That's actually Big Shaq, Michael Oluwatosin." Jessica shrugged. "So, even celebrities need the right ticket." No, you don't understand. Raj pulled out his phone and quickly opened an article. Look at this. He bought Elite Airways 3 months ago. He owns the company. He's our boss. Jessica felt like someone had suddenly turned off the oxygen in the cabin. She grabbed Raj's phone and stared at the article. There was a photo of the same tall man she'd just turned away, dressed in a sharp business suit, shaking hands with the former CEO of Elite Airways. The headline read, "Rapper and business mogul Big Shaq acquires Elite Airways in surprise move." This can't be real, she whispered, but deep down she knew it was. Her mind flashed back to his boarding pass that she hadn't properly checked, his calm insistence that he belonged in first class. It's real, Jess, and you just sent him to sit in economy. Jessica handed the phone back to Raj, her hand trembling slightly. Why didn't anyone tell us? There should have been a memo or something. There was, Raj said, showing her an email on his phone. Last month, with his photo and everything. Said he might be traveling on our routes occasionally to get a feel for the business. Jessica remembered now. She'd skimmed that email during a busy week of flights. It had completely slipped her mind. What do I do? She asked, feeling sick to her stomach. 6 years of perfect service, and now she might lose her job over this mistake. I don't know, Raj admitted, but his seat in first class is still empty. Jessica glanced at seat 2A. The leather first-class seat worth thousands of pounds sat empty while the owner of the entire airline was cramped in economy because of her. I need to fix this, she said. Be careful, Raj warned. Captain wants us ready for takeoff in 2 minutes. Jessica nodded and quickly made her way to economy class. She found him easily. It was hard to miss someone so tall. He was squeezed into a middle seat, his knees pressing against the seat in front. Despite the uncomfortable position, he was smiling and chatting with the passenger next to him, a young woman who seemed thrilled to be sitting beside someone famous. Jessica stood in the aisle, her heart pounding in her chest. The owner of the airline. The man who could fire her with a snap of his fingers. And she treated him like he didn't belong. He noticed her standing there and raised an eyebrow. Mr. Oluwatosin, she began, her mouth suddenly dry. I'm so sorry about the misunderstanding. No worries, he said with a casual shrug, but Jessica could see the other passengers turning to look. Your first-class seat is available, she continued, if you'd like to move there now, before takeoff. He checked his watch. Seemed pretty important to keep me in my assigned seat a few minutes ago. Jessica felt her face burning with embarrassment. Some of the nearby passengers were whispering now, probably wondering what was happening. I made a mistake, she admitted, loud enough for those around to hear. I didn't recognize you, and I didn't check your boarding pass properly. I'm truly sorry. Big Shaq looked at her for what felt like forever. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. What's your name? He asked. Jessica Parker, sir. Well, Jessica Parker, at least you're honest about your mistake. That's something. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, announcing immediate preparation for takeoff. Jessica knew she needed to get back to her station. Will you come to first class? She asked, aware that every second of this conversation might be determining her future at the airline. Big Shaq looked around at economy, at the cramped seats and the curious faces watching them. I'll stay here for takeoff, he said finally, but we'll definitely talk more about this later. Jessica nodded, not sure if his tone meant she should be relieved or terrified. As she hurried back to her position for takeoff, one thing was crystal clear. This was going to be the longest flight of her entire career. The plane climbed through the clouds as Jessica tried to focus on her duties. She smiled at passengers, offered drinks, and answered questions about the flight time to New York, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Every few minutes, she glanced toward economy class, where Big Shaq remained in his cramped seat. Should I go talk to him now? She wondered, adjusting the temperature for an elderly passenger who complained of being cold. Or wait until the seatbelt sign is off. Jessica's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee for a businessman who barely looked up from his laptop. In 6 years of flying, she'd never made such a huge mistake. What if he fired her? What if he sued the airline for discrimination? What if this ended up on social media, with her name and face for everyone to see? Her colleague Raj passed by with a drink cart. He's still in economy, he whispered, hasn't complained or anything. That makes it worse, Jessica replied. If he was yelling or demanding special treatment, at least I could feel justified. But he's just sitting there being nice about it. The empty first-class seat looks bad, Raj added. Passengers are asking questions. Jessica nodded. She had to do something. When the seatbelt sign finally turned off with a soft ding, Jessica took a deep breath and walked to economy. As she approached Big Shaq's row, she was surprised by what she saw. The famous rapper wasn't sulking or looking annoyed. Instead, he was showing something on his phone to the teenage boy sitting beside him, both of them laughing. Another passenger leaned across the aisle. "Are you really Big Shaq? Can I get a selfie?" "Sure thing," he replied with a genuine smile, leaning over for the photo. Jessica waited until they finished before approaching. "Mr. Oluwatosin," she said quietly. He looked up. "Jessica Parker," he replied, remembering her name. "What's up?" "Your first-class seat is ready whenever you'd like to move," she said, "and I wanted to apologize again for the mix-up." Big Shaq glanced around at the economy cabin. 2 rows ahead, a mother was struggling to calm a crying baby. Behind him, an older man had fallen asleep and was snoring loudly. The drink cart was making its way slowly down the narrow aisle, bumping elbows as it passed. "You know, it's interesting," he said, gesturing for Jessica to come closer so that he could speak without everyone hearing. "When I started flying 20 years ago, I was always in seats like this. Now I own the airline, and I almost forgot what it's like back here." Jessica didn't know how to respond to that. "These seats are too small," he continued, his knees clearly pressed against the seat in front. "The service is slower, but people talk to each other more. In first class, everyone puts on headphones and pretends no one else exists." A flight attendant passed by with the drink cart, giving Jessica a curious look. "I should get back to work," she said, "but your seat is available whenever you're ready." Big Shaq checked his watch. "I've got some emails to write. I'll come up in a bit." As Jessica turned to go, he added, "How long have you worked for Late Airways?" 6 years, she answered, wondering if he was calculating her severance package. "And you always follow the rules like that? Not checking boarding passes properly but still turning people away?" Jessica felt her face flush. "No, sir, I made a mistake." "I should have looked at your boarding pass more carefully." "But you saw me and decided I didn't belong in first class," he said. It wasn't a question. Jessica could have made excuses. She could have lied. But looking at his calm, thoughtful expression, she decided honesty was her only option. "Yes," she admitted. "I saw how you were dressed and assumed you were in the wrong place. I was wrong to judge you that way, and I'm truly sorry." Big Shaq nodded slowly. "At least you're honest about it." A chime sounded, and the captain's voice came over the speakers announcing turbulence ahead. Jessica needed to get back to her station. "We'll talk more later," Big Shaq said, turning back to his phone. Jessica returned to first class, her mind racing. He didn't seem angry, but something in his voice suggested this conversation wasn't over. The empty first-class seat seemed to mock her as she passed by it. 20 minutes later, as Jessica was collecting empty cups from the first-class passengers, she looked up to see Big Shaq standing at the entrance to the cabin. Without a word, he walked to his seat and sat down, immediately pulling out his laptop. Jessica approached with the drink tray. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Oluwatosin?" "Just water," he replied without looking up. "And when you have a moment, I'd like to speak with you privately." Jessica nodded, her stomach knotting with anxiety. Was this the moment she'd been dreading? The conversation that would end her career? "Of course," she said, her voice steady despite her fears. "I'll be back with your water right away." Jessica grabbed a bottle of water and a glass with shaking hands. She carefully placed them on a small tray, added a lemon slice, and took a deep breath. This moment could change everything. She'd seen flight attendants fired for less serious mistakes. "You can do this," she whispered to herself as she walked toward Big Shaq's seat. "Just be honest and professional." Big Shaq was typing something on his laptop when she approached. She placed the water and glass on his tray table, being extra careful not to spill a drop. "Your water, Mr. Oluwatosin," she said. "Would you like to speak now, or would you prefer I come back later?" He closed his laptop halfway and looked up at her. His expression wasn't angry, but it was hard to read. "Now is good," he said. "Have a seat." Jessica glanced around nervously. "I'm not supposed to sit with passengers during service." I think we can make an exception, he replied with a hint of a smile. Unless you're going to tell the owner of the airline that he's breaking the rules again. A few nearby passengers looked over curiously. Jessica sat down in the empty seat across the aisle, perching right on the edge. First, Big Shaq began, I want you to know that I'm not recording this conversation, and I'm not planning to post about it online or anything like that. This stays between us. Jessica let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Thank you. Second, I'm not going to fire you. Another wave of relief washed over her. But, he continued, leaning forward slightly, I do want to understand what happened back there. Jessica nodded. I made a judgment based on your appearance. I saw your casual clothes and assumed you couldn't be a first-class passenger. I should have checked your boarding pass properly instead of just glancing at it. Do you know why I was dressed this way? He asked, gesturing to his hoodie and sweatpants. Jessica shook her head. I had a red-eye flight from Los Angeles to London last night, then meetings all morning. I'm heading to New York for more meetings tonight. These clothes are comfortable for long flights. He took a sip of water. But that's not really the point, is it? No, sir, Jessica admitted. It doesn't matter why you were dressed casually. I shouldn't have judged you either way. Big Shaq nodded. You know, when I was starting out as a musician, I saved up for months to buy a first-class ticket. I wanted to see what it was like. I dressed in my best clothes, a suit that didn't quite fit right because I couldn't afford tailoring. He smiled at the memory. The flight attendant took one look at me and asked to see my boarding pass 3 times. She kept checking it against her list as if she couldn't believe it was real. Jessica felt a pang of recognition. Had she done the same thing to other passengers over the years? That's terrible, she said quietly. It happens, he shrugged. But now that I own this airline, I'd like it to happen less. A child ran down the aisle, chased by a frazzled parent. They both waited until they passed. Here's what I'm curious about, Big Shaq continued. If I had been wearing an expensive suit, would you have checked my boarding pass so carefully? Or would you have just assumed I belonged? Jessica wanted to defend herself, but deep down she knew the answer. Probably not, she admitted. I probably would have just welcomed you aboard. He nodded, seeming to appreciate her honesty. And if I had been a woman in casual clothes? Or an older person, would you have reacted the same way? Jessica had never thought about these questions before. I don't know, she said truthfully. I'd like to think I treat everyone equally, but maybe I don't. Big Shaq took another sip of water. None of us do, Jessica. We all make snap judgments. The question is whether we're willing to recognize them and try to do better. A call button dinged a few rows back. Jessica glanced over, knowing she should answer it. Go ahead, Big Shaq said. We can finish talking later. Jessica stood up, feeling strangely lighter despite the serious conversation. Thank you for being so understanding. I haven't always been the boss, he replied with a small smile. I remember what it's like to make mistakes at work. As Jessica went to answer the call button, she thought about what he'd said. She'd been so worried about losing her job that she hadn't considered the bigger picture. This wasn't just about her mistake, it was about how people judge each other based on appearance, and how those judgments affect their actions. Everything okay? Raj whispered as they passed in the aisle. I think so, Jessica replied. He's not going to fire me. Lucky, Raj said. But what's going to happen? Jessica glanced back at Big Shaq, who was typing on his laptop again. I'm not sure, she said, but I think this might turn into something important. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, rattling the overhead bins. Jessica grabbed the back of a seat to steady herself. Somehow, the shaking plane felt like a perfect symbol for her day, unstable, unpredictable, and completely beyond her control. Yet for the first time since she'd realized her mistake, she wasn't just afraid. She was curious about what might happen next. The rest of the flight was busy, giving Jessica little time to dwell on her conversation with Big Shaq. She served meals, helped a nervous flyer through turbulence, and cleaned up a spilled drink in premium economy. But every time she passed through first class, she felt his eyes following her. 3 hours into the flight, during a quiet period when most passengers were watching movies or napping, Jessica found herself with a moment to breathe. She stood in the galley, organizing snacks for the next service round. Got a minute? She turned to find Big Shaq standing in the galley doorway, much taller than she remembered. Up close, she noticed details she'd missed before: the small diamond studs in his ears, the designer logo supplely printed on his hoodie, the expensive watch peeking out from his sleeve. "Of course," she said, setting down the stack of napkins she'd been counting. "I've been thinking about our situation," he said, keeping his voice low. "And I have a proposal." Jessica braced herself. Maybe he wasn't going to fire her outright, but a forced transfer to another route or demotion seemed likely. "What kind of proposal?" she asked. "I'm putting together a team to review our customer service protocols," he explained. "People with real experience who can spot the problems I might miss from my fancy office." Jessica blinked in surprise. This wasn't what she expected at all. "You want me on this team?" she asked, confused. "After what happened?" Big Shaq leaned against the counter. "Because of what happened. You made a mistake today, Jessica. A pretty big one. But you owned it completely. No excuses. No defensiveness. That's rare." A flight attendant from economy passed through the galley, giving them a curious look before continuing on her way. "Plus," Big Shaq continued, "you've been with the airline for 6 years. You know the systems, the problems, the workarounds. That's valuable experience." Jessica couldn't believe what she was hearing. "So instead of firing me, you're promoting me?" "Let's call it a special assignment," he said with a small smile. "The pay bump would be temporary, just while the project runs. 3 months, maybe 4. You'd need to split your time between flying and meetings at headquarters." The plane hit a small patch of turbulence, making the cups in the galley rattle. Jessica steadied herself against the counter. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Most bosses would have just fired me and been done with it." Big Shaq looked thoughtful. "When I was starting out, people were quick to judge me, to write me off. But a few people looked past my mistakes and gave me chances I didn't deserve. I wouldn't be here without them." He paused, looking out the small galley window at the clouds below. "Besides," he added, "firing you wouldn't solve the real problem. Your mistake today, it wasn't just about you. It was about policies, training, company culture, things that affect all our employees and passengers." The call button dinged from first class. Jessica glanced in that direction, knowing she should answer it. "Go ahead," Big Shaq said. "But think about my offer. I'll need your answer before we land." As Jessica hurried to answer the call, her mind was racing. This morning, she'd been a regular flight attendant just doing her job. Now the owner of the company was offering her a chance to help shape the future of the airline. She helped an older gentleman adjust his seat and fetched a blanket for a woman who was cold. Every small interaction with passengers suddenly felt different. She found herself really looking at each person, wondering what assumptions she might be making without realizing it. An hour later, Jessica was collecting trash when Big Shaq signaled her over. "I forgot to mention something important about my offer," he said. "Your first assignment would be to create training materials about unconscious bias, using your experience today as a case study." Jessica felt her face flush. "You want me to tell other employees about my mistake?" "Not with your name attached, if you don't want that," he clarified. "But yes, real examples are more powerful than theoretical ones." The thought made Jessica uncomfortable, but she also saw the value in it. How many other employees might be making the same assumptions she had? "I need to think about it," she said honestly. Big Shaq nodded. "That's fair. But remember, we all make mistakes, Jessica. What matters is what we learn from them." As she walked back to the galley, Jessica spotted her reflection in a darkened window. She looked the same as she had this morning. Same uniform, same professional smile, but something felt profoundly different. The mistake that she thought might end her career could instead be the beginning of something new. The captain announced they were starting their initial descent into New York. Jessica began preparing the cabin, her mind still turning over Big Shaq's unexpected offer. Was she ready to step out of her comfort zone? To use her embarrassing mistake to help others learn? As she passed Big Shaq's seat for the pre-landing check, he looked up from his laptop. "Time's almost up," he said quietly. "What's your answer?" Jessica took a deep breath. Sometimes the most important choices in life come when you least expect them. "Yes," Jessica said, surprising herself with how quickly the answer came. "I'd like to be part of that team." Big Shaq's face broke into a wide smile. "Good choice. We'll talk details after we land." As he returned to his seat, Jessica felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, excitement, and lingering embarrassment about how the day had started. She checked her watch. Only an hour left before landing in New York. The captain's voice came over the intercom announcing their final descent. Jessica and the other flight attendants moved through their pre-landing routine, checking seatbelts, collecting last-minute trash, and making sure tray tables were stowed. When Jessica reached Big Shaq's seat, he was typing something on his phone. "We'll be landing soon, Mr. Oluwatosin. Please put your seat in the upright position and stow your laptop." He nodded and closed his laptop, sliding it into a sleek leather bag. "What made you say yes?" he asked quietly as she checked his seatbelt. Jessica thought for a moment. "Honestly, because it scares me a little, and because I've been doing the same job for 6 years without much change." "Good reasons," he replied. "Growth usually starts with a little fear." The plane began its descent through the clouds, the cabin lights dimming slightly as they approached New York. Jessica took her position for landing, her mind already racing ahead to what this new opportunity might mean. After a smooth landing and the usual rush of passengers gathering their belongings, Jessica stood by the exit door, thanking people as they left the plane. Big Shaq was one of the last at exit, hanging back to avoid the crowd. "I have meetings all afternoon," he said, stopping in front of her. "But I'd like you to come to the corporate office tomorrow morning at 9. We can talk more then." He handed her a business card with an address in Midtown Manhattan. "I'll be there," Jessica promised. As she watched him walk up the jetway, she still couldn't quite believe how the day had turned out. What had seemed like a career-ending mistake was now opening a door she never expected. Later that evening in her hotel room, Jessica called her mom back home in Chicago. "How was your flight?" her mom asked. Jessica laughed. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me," her mom said. Jessica told her the whole story, how she'd misjudged Big Shaq, her panic when she realized her mistake, and the surprising offer he'd made. "So tomorrow I'm going to the corporate headquarters to discuss being part of this special team," she finished. "That's amazing, honey," her mom said, "but not surprising." "What do you mean?" "I made a huge mistake." "Yes, but you've always been the type to admit when you're wrong. That's rare these days. Most people get defensive or make excuses." Jessica thought about her 6 years as a flight attendant. How many times has she made quick judgments about passengers based on how they looked or dressed? The businessman who seemed too important to follow safety instructions. The woman with 3 children she assumed would be demanding. The elderly passenger she thought would need extra help. Sometimes those judgments were right, but often they weren't. And until today, she'd never really thought about how those assumptions affected her behavior. The next morning, Jessica put on her best suit, the one she usually saved for job interviews, and took a taxi to the address on Big Shaq's card. The Elite Airways corporate office occupied several floors of a gleaming skyscraper with views of Central Park. At the reception desk, a friendly security guard checked her ID and gave her a visitor badge. "Mr. Oluwatosin is expecting you," he said. "Take the elevator to floor 37. The elevator doors opened onto a sleek office space with the Elite Airways logo prominently displayed on the wall. A woman at the front desk looked up with a smile. "You must be Jessica Parker," she said. "They're waiting for you in the conference room." Jessica's heart skipped. "They?" "Mr. Oluwatosin and the team," the receptionist explained, standing to show her the way. "Follow me." As they walked through the office, Jessica noticed people glancing at her curiously. Did they know who she was? Had the story of her mistake already made the rounds? The receptionist stopped at a glass-walled conference room where Big Shaq sat at a table with 4 other people. He stood up when he saw her, waving her in. "Right on time," he said. "Everyone, this is Jessica Parker, the flight attendant I told you about." Jessica took a deep breath and stepped into the room, ready to begin the next chapter of her career, one that had started with the most embarrassing mistake of her professional life. 6 months later, Jessica stood at the front of a training room at Elite Airways headquarters. 20 new flight attendants sat before her, fresh-faced and eager in their crisp uniforms. "Today we're going to talk about something important," Jessica began, clicking to the first slide of her presentation. "How our assumptions about people affect the way we treat them." She looked out at the attentive faces. These new employees had no idea that the training program they were experiencing was completely different from the one she'd gone through 6 years ago. "Let me tell you a story," Jessica continued. "About 6 months ago, I was working a London to New York flight. I saw a tall man in a hoodie and sweatpants trying to enter first class, and without properly checking his boarding pass, I sent him to economy. That man turned out to be Big Shaq, the owner of this airline." A few of the trainees gasped. Others exchanged wide-eyed looks. "I know," Jessica smiled. "Pretty big mistake, right? I thought for sure I was going to get fired." She clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo of Big Shaq in casual clothes next to another of him in a business suit. "But instead of firing me, Mr. Oluwatosin did something unexpected. He asked me why I made that assumption. He made me think about the snap judgments I was making based on appearance. And then he asked me to help change our company culture." In the back of the room, the door opened quietly. Jessica's smile widened as Big Shaq himself slipped in, taking a seat in the corner. They had planned this surprise appearance for the new trainees. "The truth is," Jessica continued, "we all make assumptions about people based on how they look, dress, or speak. Sometimes we're not even aware we're doing it. But as flight attendants, those assumptions can affect how we treat our passengers." She clicked to a new slide showing passengers of different ages, races, and styles of dress. The businessman in the expensive suit, we might assume he's demanding or entitled. The mother traveling with small children, we might expect her to be frazzled or disorganized. The teenager with headphones, we might think they'll be rude or disruptive. Jessica paused, looking out at the trainees who were nodding in recognition. But these assumptions limit us. They prevent us from seeing the actual person in front of us, and they can lead to mistakes like the one I made. For the next hour, Jessica led the group through scenarios and exercises designed to highlight unconscious bias. The training program she helped develop over the past 6 months was now being rolled out across the entire airline. As the session wrapped up, she introduced Big Shaq, who came forward to answer questions from the excited trainees. Jessica watched from the side, feeling a surge of pride. The program was making a real difference. Later, as they walked to the cafeteria for lunch, Big Shaq bumped her shoulder playfully. "Good session. You had them hooked from the beginning." "It's easy when it's a true story," Jessica replied. "And when the ending is so unexpected." "Speaking of unexpected," he said, "I have news. The customer satisfaction scores from the past 3 months just came in. Overall ratings are up 12%. Jessica stopped walking. "Seriously? That much?" Big Shaq nodded. "And the biggest improvement was in how passengers feel they're treated by our staff. More people are saying they feel seen and respected. That's directly from your training program." Jessica felt a warmth spread through her chest. 6 months ago, she'd been terrified that one mistake would end her career. Instead, it had led to the most fulfilling work she'd ever done. The airline board was impressed. Big Shaq continued as they started walking again. "They've approved making your position permanent. Head of Customer Experience Training, if you want it." Jessica nearly stumbled. "A permanent position? Away from flying?" "You'd still fly occasionally to stay connected to the front lines," he explained. "But yes, mostly you'd be developing training programs, working with staff, measuring results." They reached the cafeteria doors. Inside, Jessica could see her team, the people she'd been working with for the past 6 months on this project. "Do you need time to think about it?" Big Shaq asked. Jessica shook her head. Just like on the plane 6 months ago, she knew her answer immediately. "I want it," she said confidently. "I found something I'm good at, something that matters." Big Shaq smiled. "You know what the best leaders do? They turn their biggest mistakes into their greatest opportunities. That's exactly what you've done." As they walked into the cafeteria, Jessica reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. One moment of poor judgment that could have ended everything had instead opened a door to something new. She had learned that sometimes the worst days of your life can lead to the best opportunities if you're brave enough to admit your mistakes and open to learning from them. "By the way," Big Shaq said as they joined the others at the table, "I'm flying to Tokyo next week in economy, just to see what other improvements we might need to make." Jessica laughed. "Just make sure you wear a suit this time." "I've trained our staff to look past appearances, but let's not make it too challenging." Big Shaq's booming laugh drew looks from around the cafeteria. No promises, he said with a wink. No promises at all.